future of Satisfactory is looking very promising. Over the last few years, we've enjoyed consistent updates where we've received a lot of new content. Drones and Mark 6 conveyor belts are just some of what we've received in said updates. Unfortunately, however, there's something that will never be coming into Satisfactory, not officially at least. And that's renewable energy. Saying that something will never happen is a far stretch. We always said that Mark 6 conveyor belts would never happen, and of course they're now in the game. But there's a reason I say this. A few years ago, Coffee Stain Studios released a video titled 6 Things We're Never Adding into Satisfactory, where they mentioned things like base defense, factory maintenance, survival elements, terraforming, golf, as well as green technology. Here's quite a long clip of Jace, one of the former community managers at Coffee Stain Studios, talking a bit more about green tech. We'll be breaking down the clip so I can give my 2 cents on the situation.
So the first reason we don't really want to add green energy to Satisfactory is because, like, thematically, like lore-wise, it doesn't really fit so well. The point of Satisfactory is you come down to this beautiful, pristine, like, planet, and then you exploit it without care for it. You know, that's kind of one of the thematic, driving forces of the game, right? And so we think that green energy doesn't really make sense in this space. Like, why is Fixit now offering green technology, This
point makes a ton of sense. Again, especially according to the Satisfactory lore, the only reason we are on this planet is to exploit its resources. We're not there to sustain life. We are only there to gather our space elevator parts, shoot them through the space elevator itself, and then to try and save humanity. We are not there to protect the world, we are not there to protect the local inhabitants, we are literally only there for profit and for personal gain, and for Fixit's gain at least. Things like wind turbines and hydroelectric dams, things like this wouldn't make any sort of sense. Because again, these things take ages to set up, and as Ada keeps on reminding us, efficiency first. Is it really efficient for us to be setting up all these wind turbines? Probably not. So in regards to the Satisfactory lore, sustainable or green energy isn't ever going to be a thing, because it makes absolutely no sense. You're supposed to be exploiting the planet, not actually helping its local inhabitants. There's a second point that Jace mentions that we also have to shine some light on, and here's that clip.
But there is another major reason, which is the real nail in the coffin for green energy and why we can't really add it. And that is simply because there's a massive balancing issue with it. So in Satisfactory, all power sources require a steady supply of resources. And in fact, the entire game is built around not amassing things, but improving your supply rate, right? Parts per minute or whatever. Power supplies such as green energy would not need that at all. They would break away from that completely. They wouldn't have hard limitations of supply applying to them, and so that would make them incredibly overpowered as a power source. Time and supply per minute is like the driving thing in Satisfactory, and they're the limiting factors that we sort of apply whenever we look into any form of balancing within Satisfactory. And however, green energy wouldn't rely on either of those things. They would sort of rely on space, like where you can build them, build solar panels, for example, or just like parts. You just need to stockpile a lot of parts, but those two things aren't really resources in Satisfactory.
Balancing issues is such a massive reason as to why green tech is not in this game, and I'm sure many people realize this, but biomass burners require biomass, coal generators require water and coal, fuel generators require fuel, which then require crude oil, etc, etc. Nuclear generators require nuclear things, and that's essentially how you get power. But essentially, this will make gathering power extremely easy unless the price of things like solar panels and wind turbines is extremely expensive or unlocked only in later tiers.
We could balance it by having the buildings either cost a lot, or maybe they produce really low amounts of power. That could sort of balance it a little bit, but then you need to realize that the balancing there is just tedium, right? We're offsetting their power by making them really tedious to build. So we need to think, okay, is that the kind of fun we want to introduce? We need to introduce more tedium to Satisfactory so that you can have green power. We just don't think that's adding a positive element to the game. So yeah, some folks have also suggested, well, what if you need to maintain them, clean them, or something like that? But then we get back to the factory maintenance argument that we sort of mentioned before.
Still, what would stop you from placing down dozens or even hundreds of these renewable energy machines and get infinite power? Why bother spending a month and a half, like I did for example, on my rocket fueled factory, when I can just place down a wind turbine somewhere in the middle of the ocean and never have to worry about it ever again. Jace also does mention that another way that they can try and tweak this is by essentially saying that these wind turbines or hydroelectric dams or anything else like that, solar panels for example, actually generates very, very little power. But then the question would be, well, what's the point? And how little power as well? If it only gives you, let's say, 5 megawatts for a solar panel, and that solar panel costs like 50 reinforced iron plates, no one in their right mind, especially early or mid-game, is ever going to do that. Actually trying to balance this green or renewable technology into Satisfactory is way easier said than done. Something else that I thought of is something that we actually do with the alien power augmenter. You can place down the augmenter and it functions, but if you feed the alien power augmenter with an alien power matrix, it makes it far more efficient. Maybe they could do something like that with hydroelectric or hydropower, or again, even solar panels as well. Like, you have to feed some sort of like electrical part into these solar panels that makes them far more efficient. This way, these solar panels and wind turbines, etc., all actually end up costing resources over time, which then balances it out a little bit more. This is the only compromise I can think of that makes reasonable sense. And of course, feeding these things are actually going to be rather expensive as well, especially if you have a lot. So the more solar panels you have, the more resources you have to feed into them to make them way more efficient. And when I say way more efficient, again, I'm talking like from 5 megawatts to 30 megawatts. So it'll be quite expensive to do, but you get far more power from it. I think that would make sense if they were ever going to introduce reusable or sustainable energy. Now let's talk about the third point that Jace mentions.
So yeah, it really looks like green energy is not going to be going ahead in Satisfactory. There is one sort of caveat that we have talked about, and that is like hydropower might be interesting because space is limited. There's only so many waterfalls on the map, so there's a potential for that there, but we'll have to see.
Hydropower, I suppose, makes sense. Like, again, Jace did talk about, there are a very limited amount of waterfalls in this game, so it would be kind of interesting if you could place like a dam or anything to do with like water or hydropower next to these waterfalls, because that would be a fantastic way of getting power, a very limited way of getting power in some regard, because again, there isn't many locations to place them in, but it could also be a really fun addition to the game as well. A little bit earlier on, I was talking about how there is some sort of renewable energy already in the game, and that's the geothermal generators, and you can actually generate about 10,000 megawatts worth of power at most from these things, so that's already a fantastic addition into the game. They're not really that cheap, and they are unlocked towards the later part of the game as well, like late mid, I would say. But still, that's a really fun addition to the game, and I see absolutely nobody complaining about them. So hydropower could most certainly be an addition that they could be adding in the game sometime down the line, and we definitely can't rule that out just yet. I honestly believe that out of all the renewable energy that they could potentially add into the game, which I don't think they would, hydropower would most likely be on top of that list, since it seems like the easiest and most efficient way to actually introduce it. Of course, building these hydropower locations or factories or a dam, for example, will be very, very expensive. It will give you a decent amount of power, and there'll be a limited location for it. So, again, in my opinion, I feel like that's pretty decent. But let's just take a very quick moment to talk about the background gameplay. I've just said that renewable energy will never happen, but we can clearly see it functioning in the background, and no, I did not build this myself, but instead, this is actually a mod. And it's called Refined Power by Mr. Hid 6. Over 7 million people have viewed this mod, and over 1 million people have actually downloaded it, so by no means is this a small mod. And even though we've already seen quite a few of the machines in the background gameplay, it's still really cool to actually see them in these pictures here as well. These turbines, I believe there's a Mark 1, Mark 2, and a Mark 3 wind turbine. We've also got a bunch of solar panels down here as well, which looks absolutely fantastic, as well as all of the modular power itself. And there are a lot of these things. I mean, as you can probably imagine, this mod is all about power. So it's really cool to see that they've added a bunch of these generators into the game. That's literally completely changed the game itself. And again, a few of these you've already seen in the background gameplay. And when you look at that, the biomass burner with a conveyor belt going into it. And of course, I believe this was made well before this was actually introduced into Satisfactory 1.0. So that's really, really cool to see. And again, a big credit from all of these creators or people that maybe help with the project there as well. That's always cool to see. And then you've got the building. So again, you've got the wind turbines, you've got Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3. You've got water turbines as well, which is fantastic. You've got some modular power stuff over there as well, biomass heater. You've got a steam cooling tower. Yeah, a bunch of really, really cool things here as well. So it's safe to say this is one of probably the best mods going for Satisfactory right now. And again, if you are particularly interested, PC, thank you, in things like this, the renewable power and a bunch of other different types of power in the game, then you'll probably end up really, really enjoying this. But as always, let me know your thoughts and feelings down below in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.